Reaper, make sure this is on. Guys, said it once before, I'll say it a million times. My goal is not so that you like me, not so that you think I'm entertaining, it's to help you learn about the human experience and the state of the world. And we do that in a lot of different ways. Sometimes we use news as a medium, sometimes we use video games, sometimes we use interpersonal interactions. But that is the goal. Why? Because that is the most important thing. Nothing else matters as much as that. The only thing that matters in life is your relationship with you and other people. And we need you to be okay, and we need other people
Moorish
to be okay.
Prince.
The only thing that matters. Everything else is fluff. Everything else is nonsense. Only thing that matters is your relationship with yourself and your relationship with other people. We need you to be okay. We need other people to be okay. There's a lot of money and power that goes into separating us so that that doesn't happen. So we have to learn about it, or else we can't fight against it.
Simply the
This is a clip. I'm not familiar with this channel. I'm familiar with, I wouldn't say familiar. I know who this journalist is. I don't have a great concept of his like reputation or whatever, but I don't think that really matters. I think what matters is the discussion being had. Oftentimes you'll see people sort of designating other people as untouchables and, you know, boogeymen kind of characters that you shouldn't go around. Like, let's say, for example, somebody like, let's take Nick Fuentes, who's an absolute white supremacist horror show. But but like people say, you know, don't listen to Nick Fuentes, don't platform him, obviously, right? Because all the things he says are fucking horrible. But let's say tomorrow Nick Fuentes said, like, the sky is blue and everyone should have healthcare. Am I then going to say, like, that's wrong because Nick Fuentes said it and he's a morally abhorrent human being? No, right? So it's more about the merit of what they're saying, the moral implications of what they're saying, and less about the person. I can say what this person is saying and their reputation is morally reprehensible, and in the same breath say that one thing that they said was right. That's okay. Great leaders of the past did this. Think MLK when he wrote his letter from the Birmingham jail. He invoked a ton of philosophers who were white supremacists, right? He didn't simply say, I'm not going to grapple with these people's ideas because they're morally reprehensible. He engaged and challenged their ideas and used it as a segue to discuss his own philosophy. So I say that to say we cannot simply like drown out the things that we don't like. It's just another form of avoidance. We need to engage with everything around us, be it to say this is wrong or to say this part of it is right or some other thing.
Natural order of things.
And
Clara
I know it's not
Matai
sexy,
is an author and
it's
professor of
boring,
economics
whatever.
whose work explores how economic ideas become tools of power, shaping policy while masking the political decisions beneath. Her new book, Escape from Capitalism, argues that many of the problems that we see as inevitable, poverty, unemployment, inflation, are built into the system and shored up by models and theories designed to convince us that there is no alternative. Welcome to the podcast.
It's such a pleasure.
I mean, how can you escape capitalism? I mean, we are all brought up to believe or to think that it is just the way of the world. It is human nature to want to accumulate things and wealth and to have the freedom to choose what you want and what your destiny is.
This is my favorite dentist hack to clean my retainer. If you wear a retainer every night like I do, you know how hard it is to keep it truly.
So the first point is to escape the mental trap that naturalizes the system, that makes us think exactly what you just said, which is that we have a spontaneous tendency towards this capitalist economy.
So I love how she frames that. The first thing being we need to escape this narrative that says that this is natural. I think that's the case for virtually every single
What are we doing? Me, myself, and I.
I think that's the case for virtually every single issue in society. So, Nico, oftentimes these things are presented as though they are inevitable, and that's simply not the case.
What I show in the book is that capitalism is far from spontaneous. It requires constant, violent enforcement of those policies of austerity to preserve the system in place. So what the state needs to do is to protect the market by keeping the majority of us subordinated to the market itself and maintaining us in a situation by which we have no alternative but to go work for a wage, and usually a very low wage and very precarious conditions.
So what is capitalism?
I mean, she's spot on. She's spot on, right? And me saying she's spot on is not what makes her spot on. It's the merit of the argument again. But she's spot on. The system is self-perpetuating. It's designed to be. The powers that be will do any and everything. They do any and everything to justify it because they benefit from it to the tunes of millions of billions of dollars, trillions even. So it comes as no surprise that they've created such an intricate system that works so well as to be almost invisible to the naked eye. And let's rewind that again, because I mean,
preserve the system in place. So what spontaneous? It requires constant. We have a spontaneous tendency towards this is to escape the mental trap that naturalizes the system, that makes us think exactly what you just said, which is that we have a spontaneous tendency towards this capitalist economy. What I show in the book is that capitalism is far from spontaneous. It requires constant, violent enforcement of those policies of austerity to preserve the system in place. So what the state...
Constant, violent enforcement of the system in place to preserve it. Where do we see this? I talk about literally everywhere around the world. Think every single conflict that exists is to preserve the capitalist system. Think Venezuela, the invasion, to preserve the capitalist system. We invade Venezuela, kidnap, their president to get a hold of their natural resources. We do regime change in Ukraine, foment a conflict between them and Russia to drain Russia of its resources and to gain access to Ukraine's resources. Sudan, Congo, the country I was born in, Liberia, and its civil war, all of Latin America, everything is to preserve. Vietnam, to preserve and proliferate the capitalist system. All of the violence, all of the death, all of the murder is to preserve and proliferate the capitalist system. All of the mass manipulation, the small interpersonal prejudices, the various isms to uphold the system as it is. And I'm sure she'll get into exactly what that looks like.
It needs to do is to protect the market by keeping the majority of us subordinated to the market itself. And
how are we doing?
How do they keep us? What's up, River? How do they keep us subordinate to the market as it is? They do this in many ways. Just think about your everyday life. What are your options to escape the market? What are those options? They don't exist. You can't simply decide one day, no longer going to work. I'm going to what? You're going to what? There are no other options. You are subordinate to the market. You must participate in the market. To not participate in the market is to commit economic and social suicide. You can't. You have no choice. You must engage in the market, even if that market is exploitative, even if that market reaps death and destruction around the world, even if that market oppresses you. You have no choice but to engage in it. You have to go to work. You have to get a pay to pay the bills, the rent, feed yourself, feed your family. You have no choice.
Head God Sleeps is going off.
Maintaining us in a situation by which we have no alternative but to go work for a wage, and usually a very low wage and very precarious conditions.
So what is capitalism in your terms?
Capitalism is a system based on two pillars. One is wage labor, exactly the idea that the majority on the planet has no option but to go sell their capacity to work in return for a wage and produce much more value than what they actually get in their paycheck and have very little say on how things are produced and why. And on the other hand, private investment. So the idea that it's actually very few that we have basically as society delegated the command over what is produced and why. So private investment and wage labor are the two pillars. And of course, the roof is production for profit. The fact that nothing we have around us would be ever produced if it weren't for the fact that there's expectations to get more money from what you started off with.
I mean, are you, so to what extent are you different from the anti-capitalist protesters who've been around forever, who are a tiny minority, but you're sort of respectable and at a university and not hiding your face?
So I think right now we're in a situation in which the violence of the economy has reached a very, very obscene peak. We know right now that we have actually 12.
So this very notion that the anti-capitalist protesters or these fringe or that sort of movement is this fringe, almost sideshow like thing, right? He describes it as hiding it's more capitalist propaganda that this guy's internalized. And this is not a personal dig at him. None of this is a personal issue. It's a systemic thing. But he has internalized these messages and he repeats it. And he won't perceive this as some result of psychosocial conditioning, but rather his take on how things have unfolded.
People in the world owning more than the bottom 4 billion people. We have soaring poverty, inequality that is extreme. We know the climate catastrophe, constant wars and militarism and genocide. People are suffering. So actually, the point is to say that if we want our basic needs met, if we want people to even get fed, we have 2 billion people who are suffering from food insecurity. If we want these basic needs to be met for everybody, you're an anti-capitalist, because the system is not meant to provide for the need. It's meant to provide for profit. And so what I'm trying to do here is shift the logic, again, propose a different lens through which we can say, we can't blame crony capitalism, we can't blame, excessive greed, we can't blame the idea that the system is not working as it should, and this is why we have all the inequality and the suffering. It's the opposite. The system is actually working as it's always been structured to work, and this is why we have such high accumulation at the top while the majority suffers. And we know that the reality is that even in Britain, the reason why we have so much wealth in the West.
I need to find because oftentimes you hear you like see these at least if you're in these spaces, you hear people disseminate an anti-capitalist message, Substack. You hear people talk and disseminate an anti-capitalist message, but they always have it wrapped up in some weird, like adherence to this deity figure that they make out of Marx, and they're it kind of feels like it's doctrine is how they engage with it, as opposed to speaking on the merit of the ideas and why particular parts of these ideas are hold more merit than another, right? They're overly concerned with who said it and why that has some importance. But she isn't doing that. She's taken the merit of two systems and saying, if this is the end that you want, this one makes more sense, as opposed to saying, look at all these like full historical figures and why we should think they're so amazing. And their ideas are so cool, which so many people fall victim to that. Irks me. But she's staying true to the merit of the ideas, and she's less concerned with the personalities and all this other nonsense.
Logic, again, propose a different lens through which we can say, we can't blame crony capitalism, we can't blame, excessive greed, we can't blame the idea that the system is not working as it should, and this is why we have all the inequality and the suffering. It's the opposite. The system is actually working as it's always been structured to work, and this is why we have such high accumulation at the top, while the majority suffers. And we know that the reality is that even in Britain, the reason why we have so much wealth in the West, again, very divided. In the UK, 1 out of 3 children are in poverty. And since 2014, we have had billionaires grow 6-fold. Okay, so while billionaires keep growing, children keep getting poorer. And what we see is this, even if in the UK, the wealth is distributed very unequally, the reality is that the West is basing its capacity to develop on the structural underdevelopment of the global South. And this is very important. Still today, when
so far, I mean, there are a lot of people, again, who do this work, but her ability to articulate the core of the issues. Oh my God, where's this lady been all my life? Okay. Yes, exactly all she's saying. I mean, I don't need to repeat it, but I'm going to try and distill it a bit. For the system that we have in place right now in America to exist, we must make sure every sort of global South country, there needs to be similar to how for there to be shareholders that make off with millions in profit, there need to be people who get underpaid. Similarly, for there to be a global empire that has the most wealth that any nation has ever seen in the history of humanity, for such a thing to exist, there necessarily needs to be other parts of the world that lack in resources because those resources are being extracted. That one cannot exist without the other. And that's exactly what she's speaking to, right? The global South needs to stay underdeveloped for there to be this robust, endless growth model in Western countries, particularly the US. And that is not some failing of the system. That is exactly how the system is supposed to run.
When supposedly colonialism is over, we have $65 billion.
Colonialism is not over. It never stopped being over. What I think the best way to describe it is that sort of brick and mortar colonialism is over. But colonialism, conceptually, this idea of controlling another state and extracting its resources, that never stopped. That never stops. Of course, it never stopped. It's happening right now.
Dollars or more every year that flows from the global South, especially Africa, to Europe and the United States.
Because of debt.
Because of debt, because of extraction of resources, because of the fact that, capital, we invest and we take everything else also in terms of profit. So it's the dependency, how development is there because there is the creation of underdevelopment. This is the thing, we're not on an equal path in which we're all growing progressively and getting better and better. What you see is actually the fact that those countries that have developed because the rest was going down and was underdeveloped, it was structurally destroyed. And this is what austerity policies are all about. And austerity is a basic feature of capitalism. And this is, I guess, what distinguishes my work from other critical political economy, is to say that austerity is not irrational. It's irrational for us for the logic of need, but it's very, very rational for the logic of profit. Why? Because it keeps us in a subordinate condition. It keeps
Yeah. Of course. Of course. When excuse
How
me.
we doing? Me, myself, and I.
Even this idea of austerity, right? Austerity only exists for programs that benefit the general population, the worker class. There is no such thing as austerity for the capitalist class. Far from it. There are no austerity measures for the capitalist class. There's only austerity when it comes to social security, when it comes to affordable housing, when it comes to welfare, when it comes to driving down the price of homes that aren't necessarily affordable housing, when it comes to lowering the cost of consumer goods. There's only austerity in so far as it benefits the working class. As it pertains to the owner class, the capitalist class, the shareholder class, the political class, there is no such thing as austerity. Right? So the austerity exists, exactly as she's saying, to maintain this subordinate position, to keep the working class in this subordinate position.
Keeps us needing to go work for whatever job to pay our bills and to pay for healthcare and education. So if you cut social services, as the capitalist state does, while financing private investors, de-risking, militarizing the surveillance economy, the protection of the borders, this is what capitalism needs because it protects the two pillars, right? You keep wage labor and private investment in check.
So you're saying that when people say austerity is a necessity, in a way, they're right, because it is a necessity of the system.
Yes, and this is the point. It is a necessity, but it's not a natural necessity. So this is the big point, is that it's not a technical fix. Austerity is not just a tool that economists with their neutral models adopt to save us all. It's the opposite. It's the point that economic models, as I show in the book, are deeply classist in the sense that they depict the problems as being due to workers misbehaving. This is how inflation is understood. Why is there inflation?
All of the models are classist. All of them are classist, right? Think about where these thoughts come from. What circles do they come from? Are these ideas that originate in the working class? No, they originate in elite spaces, informed by elite interest. And so naturally they perpetuate elite interest. It's never the case that, and this is never the prevailing narrative. It's never the case that the economy, and even when we know, take the 2008 financial crisis, even when we know the system did fail as a result of elite malpractice, even when we know that to be demonstrably true, no one starts talking about austerity measures in that sector. No one starts saying maybe we should limit the funds going to these financial institutions. Maybe we should put the reins on them. No, the narrative is they're too big to fail. And then we go right back to business as usual and saying, well, look at those poor people. Look at those working class people. They can afford X, Y, and Z because they're spending too much, not because we keep them in perpetual servitude. By proliferating and perpetuating a system that forces them to work for minimum wage labor or keeps them in wage servitude or wage slavery.
Bacon, egg, and cheese.
I do not like bacon, egg. I do like bacon, egg, and cheese.
Because the cost of labor are too high or because people are consuming too much. This is literally what the models say. So if the culprits are the workers, the solution needs to be increasing interest rates so that you create actually harsher unemployment levels. And unemployment, guess what, is actually important for the system. We would not have capitalism without a good dosage of unemployment. Why? Because if the workers did achieve bargaining power, they wouldn't accept these conditions that allow for profit to keep accumulating. So this is really important, is to realize that austerity is not neutral, it's political, but it's also necessary for this economic system. But
hats off to this person. Hats off to this person. Hats off. There are very few people, and this is not some personal thing. Like, I don't know who this person is. I just learned about, I don't even know her name. It's not about her. It's about the ideas and how she communicates them. She is to the letter and to the point, and is laser scalpel focus in her dissection of the issues. That's what I admire. That's what matters. I need to find this book. What is her name even in? Okay, there we go. The point that she just made, that these economic issues are not some natural force, but rather they are a result of political decisions. I mean, of course, right? Of course it's a result. The economy isn't this otherworldly force. It's something that comes about as a result of the decisions that we make. Not we don't make these decisions. The people in power do, the elites do. It's a result of the decisions they make. But oftentimes it's framed as, oh, well, the economy is this kind of other thing, and we just work to understand it, and market forces will do their thing. There are no such thing as market forces. There's elite interests making decisions to perpetuate their interests. That's it. And everything else is to obscure that reality, make you think that it's some amorphous, otherworldly thing that's outside of our control. And the best we can do is try to temper some of the more extreme waves. No. Or when it comes out that, of course, the elites are up to no good. When we look at the 2008 financial crisis, where they gambled everyone's houses away, well, it's too big to fail. But look at those welfare queens. Look at those consumers who are spending too much, and they're buying too much coffee. That's why you can't afford a home, because you get coffee every day. But we can bail out the financial industry to the tune of trillions of dollars. We can give billions of dollars in subsidies to corporations yearly. We can funnel trillions to them through the Pentagon.
I think the empowering element of the conversation is that capitalism is not spontaneous, and it has been around for very little time. Only 0.1% of the time Homo sapiens has been on the planet have we been under industrial capitalism. And in this little time, we've managed to destroy, as we know, our ecology and many people around us.
Do you mean just post the Industrial Revolution, basically?
Yes.
But even before that, wasn't it essentially a capitalist system?
Yes. Definitely. It was, capitalism was born in the UK, so the cradle of capitalism is right here where I stand today, through the enclosure system. And this is very important. This is a story that economics never tells you, because economics as a discipline is deeply ahistorical, purposefully to make you think that this is a natural, spontaneous order. The reality is that if you look at history, our economic system was born through violence. And what was this violence? It was the exclusion of people from the land. The land was the basic means of subsistence in which people could reproduce themselves autonomously from respect to the market. Once you...
Yeah, absolutely. The first owners were the landlords. That's it. They were they came and said, hey, you person living over there, you can't live over there anymore because I own it. How do you know I own it? Because I can get people to kill you if you don't move. That's what she means when she says it was derived through violence. I will bring my goons and my soldiers over there, and I will violently take the land and say, you can come back, but you have to work for me as serfs, as slaves. And I'm the landlord. And I'll allow you to keep some scraps of the labor that you do to subsist me, to enrich me. And we still have a system not too far removed from exactly that practice. We work, we make all of the wealth, they take the bulk of it and throw back scraps at us to keep us alive just long enough to go back to work again. And then they take a portion of that wealth to distract us all from the issue at hand. They foment the isms. They put on the spectacles. They say, look at the football players, look at the basketball players, look at the gratuitous sex and violence. Look at all those other people, those bad people, those untouchable people. Don't look up here, though. Don't look at what we're doing.
Eliminate the self-sufficiency, then people become market dependent, and thus, in a way, necessarily have to accept going to work for whatever situation they can find.
Well, wasn't that a product of natural human nature to acquire and to exercise power over others?
I don't think so. If you look at all the indigenous cultures in many places in the world, I'm in Oklahoma right now. This was the reservation land after the indigenous people had been kicked out. They had the Trails of Tears, many died, and they reached this reservation land, and then all the oil was stolen from the indigenous people. But the indigenous people, the Cherokee Nation, for example, was based on circular horizontal organization through councils. And actually, women had a very, very big role there.
It's crazy that you can't find her book on Amazon. Like, what, bro? I'm trying to find. So the name of her book is called Escape from Capitalism, Economics is Political and Other Liberating Truths. You can't find it on the biggest bookstore in the world, which is Amazon. So that's interesting. Anyway, this is a buy for sure. My library, my economic history library, and my sort of American militarism history library is increasing, and I love that for me and for my audience. Okay, I'm not seeing the fucking. Okay. How much is this? 26? Okay, we'll get it. Let's
and it was about caring for the commons, caring for nature rather than extracting. So, indigenous values tell you that actually humanity is not...
So far, this lady is hitting it out of the park. I've never seen, and other people have done this work. Other people have been doing this work for millions of, I'm not exaggerating, for hundreds of years, literally, right? Describing these things, these issues, the way she is synthesizing it, the simplicity by which she's communicating it, the focus by which she's communicating it. I haven't seen it done quite like that. So bravo to her. And we need more of this. We need her on CNN, on Fox News, on MSNBC, everywhere. They won't invite her on. Why? Because those are corporations, and they're owned by greater corporations, and their very purpose is to obfuscate, distract, and keep us in this illusion that, to the point that she made earlier on, that this system is spontaneous and that is the natural order of things.
Has no essence for self-interest. This is the adaptation under capitalism. We can be different according to what social relations we construct. In Tulsa, the Forum for Real Economic Emancipation I now founded, very interesting experiment to try to bring back these different social relations that need to start locally, because it's at the local level that we can associate through assemblies in which you show how collectively we can think to be together in a different way and pressure our local and national institutions to do not austerity, but democratic decision-making over the budget and much else.
Well, where does democracy come in? Because the defenders of the system will say these are choices that people have made deliberately through their democratic rights.
Well, I would say that these choices have been made by a tiny elite since the very beginning. And they are choices that by definition require.
So this is what happens, right? The choices are made by the elites, and then they manufacture consent from the public. They decide this is what we're gonna do. And now we're gonna use all our instruments of media and mass manipulation to convince you that this is what you want. To convince you that this is what you want. And then they can say, well, it's not that we are subverting the democratic process if democracy ever existed. In my opinion, it hasn't. I don't even think that's an opinion. It simply hasn't. This is not something we're doing. This is what the people want. Look, they're pretty much saying it, and the people are saying it because everything around them has been saying it. The news says it. The TV show says it. The cartoons say it. The newspapers say it. The billboards say it. The schools say it. So this is all people know. And so they repeat it. And the system perpetuates. The cycle continues.
The lack of economic agency of the majority. So what you see is that democracy, liberal democracy, is really only a superficial facade. And this is why in my work, historical work, I also show how in moments in which people challenge this capital order, liberals and fascists are great allies. And this has been my work on the post-First World War period.
How do we know what she's saying is true? Right now, the Republican Party is straight up fascist. The Democratic Party are the sort of liberal class. And guess what? They're fucking working together, guys. They're working together. They are allies. Why? Because there's an actual groundswell of resistance to the system. And so they both, the fascist class and the liberal class, benefit from the system. They want it to stay the way it is because they are at the top. And thus they work together. You don't hear the Democrats talking about abolishing ICE, though I think it's 60% of the country supports such a measure. If we were a democracy, that would be where the conversation is at, abolishing ICE. But we're not. We're not. We are an autocracy, a plutocracy, an oligarchy, ruled by a tiny majority, a tiny minority, a tiny wealthy minority. They own everything. They own the means of production, Marx would say. They own the industries. They own the newspapers. They own the factories. They own the schools. They own the political institutions. Every powerful institution you can imagine is owned and controlled by a handful of wealthy people. And they have the decision-making power to dictate the direction of society.
As you see that Benito Mussolini was adored by the Bank of England and by Montagu Norman because he was the right man at a critical moment to keep workers in check and to avoid post-capitalist experiments. So this is the whole point, is that you see that liberal democracy presupposes economic coercion. And when people rise up against economic coercion, liberals and fascists are best friends to implement austerity.
Don't start your day with a closed piece of plastic in your hand. Adding to the 4 billion plastic.
The system works so well, and of course it works well, right? Like everything. Yo, they just restricted my live for misinformation. What man? Bro, it's every time.
How we doing?
It's every time. They just restricted my live for misinformation. What did I... Bro. What the hell? TikTok is compromised. We already knew this. Hold on, guys. So I have a book here, actually. It's not the actual book, it's the reader, because
how we doing?
A professor created a reader for it because the book was really expensive. This is kind of my thing is married, so you can't really see it. But reader for Soc 420. It's a senior level sociology class. Media and society. this is Springfield College, spring 2019. This is a class studying media in society from a sociological perspective. Most of what this lady has mentioned is in some way covered in this book. Is that this book is a collection of works from many scholars and authors and so forth. Is this misinformation? It's an accredited university, but according to TikTok, it's misinformation. This is why we have to talk about it, guys, because exactly what I'm saying here is exactly what is happening. This narrative challenges the system. The system is not going to allow things that would lead to its own destruction, so it suppresses it. But you can find any manner of nonsense on here and it's going to reach millions of people. Be it some stupid ass dance, someone perpetuating separatist ideologies. Women are bad, gays are bad, Jews are bad, trans are bad. Immigrants are bad, Black people are bad. Whatever else, right? That's going to get all the millions of views. That's not misinformation, but you say the rich people control everything and, oh my God, stop the press is misinformation, ban it.
People are making within...
People rise up against economic coercion. Liberals and fascists are best friends to implement austerity.
So these are choices that people are making within a framework of coercion.
Absolutely.
In your framing. I mean, why then, when we have seen alternative economic models in the 20th century, have they all gravitated towards capitalism? Why in Russia,
right.
Why in China,
yes.
Why in parts of India, yes. Do they all end up like us?
Yes. Well, I don't think it's because we have a magnetic attraction or a fair system. It's mostly because we impose our capital order globally, right? If one reads...
Of course we do. We impose this order. We do it through sanctions. We do it through regime change. We do it through straight up boots on the ground warfare. If you oppose the system, we vilify, we wage war, we strangle, we starve. That's why this system is implemented globally, not because it makes the most sense, not because it's the most equitable, not because it best serves the needs of humanity. No, it's because if you try any alternative, we will murder you.
Just the post-Second World War, the Golden Age period, the United States were actively imposing capitalism everywhere else in the globe, right? Through militarism, through coups. We have the CIA involved in really taking over during the Cold War to protect capitalism. So, there was nothing spontaneous about this. It's about really a struggle, a political struggle. And the political struggle happens geopolitically, but also within each country. And this is very important, is that, luckily with Trump, we're seeing what capitalism actually looks like, and he's revealing the face of the brutality of the United States. In Tulsa, where I live, people can't afford anything. People don't have teeth. People can't afford to actually have a roof over their head. Many of the people who we organized through the Forum for Real Economic Emancipation are unhoused, and they barter food stamps as the only way to actually make a living. It's a situation in which the money exists, but it's really caught in the hands of very, very, very few philanthropists that, by the way, then benefit from lending money to the city, lending money to the governments, and then get all the interest back.
So, and yet, some of the poorest people in America are Trump supporters. So how have they achieved this hegemony over people who have...
What is hegemony? Hegemony is a sort of agreed upon consensus, or really, I think consensus is a better term. Hegemony is just a consensus. It's like everyone is on the same page. Everyone agrees. And so when they say global hegemony or a sort of a U.S. hegemony, all they're saying is that everyone is on the same page, that the U.S. runs the show, That is American global hegemony. Everyone is on the same page that the US runs the show. When this guy talks about hegemony in terms of poor people supporting a literal billionaire, 1%er elite like Trump, who of course has nothing to do with their interests, is because there's hegemony nationally, right? All of these various apparatus going to manufacturing that hegemony, perpetuating that hegemony. We see it in the bootstrap narrative, this idea that the system works, and for it to work for you, you simply have to work harder. That works to perpetuate this elite hegemony that says the system is working perfectly fine and you just have to keep working. And obviously, if you keep working, you make them more money and you continue to be exploited. It works great for them. And there are countless examples of that. But that's why you see this phenomenon of people constantly voting against their own interests, constantly speaking against their own interests, constantly acting against their own interests.
Nothing to gain from it.
This is why I think my book can be relevant for people. It's because it's about the narrative. Again, the way we break free is first mentally. And what you need to see is that...
Oh my God, love this person. That's what I'm trying to get. Not just like in terms of the economic system, but these things aren't separate. But it has to start with awareness. It has to start with awareness. You can't hope to change something if you can't even see it. It has to start with awareness, be it economic exploitation, be it racism, homophobia, sexism, classism, ableism, transphobia, nationalism, xenophobia, patriarchy, all of it. It first starts with awareness. And that awareness needs to be centered around how you yourself are implemented in these things, perpetuate these things, are impacted by these things. But so many of us like to act like we're above it all. It somehow escaped us. I don't perpetuate racism or anti-Blackness. I don't perpetuate sexism. I don't perpetuate patriarchy. I don't perpetuate nationalism. I don't perpetuate xenophobia. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. We all do. We've been psychosocially conditioned to. You're not above that. It did not escape you. Realize that, build your awareness of it, then you can start working to unlearn it and to find alternatives. Because that's the only way out. That's the only way out. You can't enrich yourself out of it. You either are subordinate to the capitalists, being exploited by them, or you become the capitalist and exploit everyone else. And I think to some degree, everyone knows that. They've just decided, well, I want to become the capitalist and exploit everyone else.
Trump is thriving on a narrative that has been constructed by mainstream economists for a long, long time, which tell you there's nothing unjust about this economy. If you are at the bottom, it's because you deserve it. And this is constructed through also mathematics and telling you that those who are at the top are there because they saved, they behave more rationally, and they are benefiting everyone else by employing everyone else, and so they should be lucky. So this.
And I need to save this video. I'm gonna stop pausing and let her go because honestly, there's not much I'm adding to her discussion. She's got a lot.
Methodological individualism, this idea that if you're poor, it's your fault, is spread everywhere. And people have internalized it so deeply that the only explanation they have for the fact that they're living not a human life at the end of the day, because it's dehumanizing what you see in the United States today. You blame it on those who are even weaker than you, because those are the ones who you fear the most, because you don't see who's actually benefiting. You don't see those, 19 people in the United States, which is the 0.00001% of the population, have increased their wealth in the past 2 years by almost $2 trillion, only 19 people. This is what we're talking about when we talk about this extreme red. And these people are not taxed because capital gains are not taxed. This is part of the austerity policies I was mentioning.
But isn't it the case as well that when you have very little and when you have great economic insecurity, you are desperate to hold on to whatever you have? So talking to people about breaking the system means that they will lose everything, is what they fear in the short term.
I think right now, first of all, many people have very little to lose at this point in the United States, really. I mean, 77% of American workers live paycheck to paycheck. Half of the homeless...
Guys, the most money I've ever made in my adult life, working salary jobs, has been $75,000. And I was living paycheck to paycheck. That would like put me in like the middle class. I was living paycheck to paycheck. There are people out there making like 30K. People who make 120K are living paycheck to paycheck. The degree of income inequality, let alone inequity, is staggering. Everyone is simply surviving, and that's all they give you, enough to survive. And they keep this hope dangled on a string in front of you. Maybe one day you can make enough to be just like us, to be in the capitalist class, then you can exploit everybody else.
Population that keeps skyrocketing in the US, 100.
But no one wants to hear it. No one wants to hear it. It's boring. It's scary. It's overwhelming. And I'd rather go watch fucking monkey riding a unicycle and like laugh my terror and pain away. And like, that's also not a character flaw. I don't blame them. It's fucking scary. It's overwhelming. And half of, not even half, the majority of us don't know the first thing to do to make sense of it all.
118,000 more homeless people, and this is just the official statistics in just 1 year. These people, work. Half of the homeless population actually has a job. So, working is not enough to secure your survival. So this is what I'm seeing with the Forum for Real Economic Emancipation, is that people want to come together with alternative models, with solidarity-based economies, with mutual aid, with the idea that let's breach market dependence, let's take back our relation with nature, with land, with resources. We need to create this alternative infrastructure that can actually serve the logic of need, that the governments, both at the local and at the federal level, and also in Europe, can no longer support. Because our governments are there to maintain the capital order in place. And the fact that Europe is militarizing like crazy while people are losing their social services is not by chance.
Curious what she's going to say. My take on why Europe is militarizing like crazy is because the United States is becoming more and more erratic, more and more dangerous. So they no longer feel that they can trust their security to the United States. And we are in a geopolitical state of flux, which is to say there's change happening. There's change happening. And at no time in history has any major change happened that has not been extremely violent. Extremely violent.
It's not to be, attributed to the bad person in power that moment. This is the tendency of the system that we, though, have the power to fight against.
They're also militarizing because as income inequality exacerbates, it adds tension to their populace. And so they're not only militarizing to protect themselves from other sovereign powers, but from their own populations, right? Who is militarizing? The elites. They control the state. They are militarizing to protect themselves from their own populations. We see it in the US. We're militarizing to protect. By we, I mean the elites of the United States are militarizing to protect their interests from their own population. Half of statecraft is population control.
Support, because our governments are there to maintain the capital order in place. And the fact that Europe is militarizing like crazy while people are losing their social services is not by chance. It's not to be, attributed to the bad person in power at that moment. This is the tendency of the system that we, though, have the power to fight against, because the system is us. And this is the empowering message of the book, is to say, we've built it. We need to see how the systemic forces trap us and shape us. But we're the architects. So there is space for alternatives if we build them.
Are we also trapped by our education system and the way economics is framed and taught?
Completely. So I'm a professor of economics, and I've for years tried to introduce alternative frameworks in the economics discipline. They do exist. They're at the margins. So anyone who who studies economics rarely gets exposed to alternative frameworks. And in my book, I try to expose the classical political economy framework. So it's built on not just my ideas. Yeah. This work is built on a tradition that is very strong. It dates to Adam Smith himself, the founding father of modern economics.
Well, people are taught about Marx, aren't they? And that's the only alternative way of looking at the world.
Yes, well, I think absolutely the important point is that, Marx has been demonized in all ways, but at the end of the day, he was one of the most important economists ever existed, because again, he did not accept the narrow idea by which things happen because of individual choices. Things happen because of systemic forces that had been built by us. And what Marx says that is very important and liberating is that capital as wealth, as money, is nothing but this surface expression of capital as a social relation, of the fact that we relate to one another in production processes that are very anti-democratic.
I mean, what I mean is, you say people are not taught any alternatives.
Ever.
I'm saying they are taught about Marxism. Are you saying the way Marxism is taught?
Okay, so this is important. I think very few people are actually taught about Marxism. Definitely if you take an econ class, you will not hear his name or even the word capitalism, as a matter of fact. You only hear about markets and individual choices and maximization. So when you do hear the word Marx, it's usually attributed to some crazy deterministic way of seeing the world, which doesn't make any sense, because again, the critique of political economy that Marx brings about is exactly to say, you economists take for granted capitalism. I, as a scholar, a historical-minded scholar, will tell you that capitalism is a specific socioeconomic system that requires specific social relations, and we can change it because it's us who have built it.
So are you a neo-Marxist?
I've definitely been inspired by Marxian political economy, and I think this is really important for economic students to go back to the original texts.
Does that make it almost impossible for you, given everything you said, to gain traction?
No, I think the opposite. I think right now, historically, we're in a moment in which people are fed up by the liberal narrative that can't explain the current crisis of humanity we're living in. And so the Marxian tradition is a tradition that actually speaks to people who consider themselves on the right, or considers themselves, Trumpist or whatever, because it goes to the real root of the problems. So in the end, if you want to get fed, you are an anti-capitalist, and you will see that only like a critical, really a critical lens, not a superficial lens, a critical lens that I try to develop in this book, will be the source for emancipation of your mind and of your actions. And so I think we are in a historical moment in which people are thirsty for radical explanations that can push us beyond. And until we try it, we can't, predict. But right now, what we know is that the current situation is getting worse and worse as we speak.
Everyone knows something is wrong. Everyone knows the current state of things doesn't make sense. Everyone knows it's unfair. Everyone knows it's inequitable. Everyone knows it's unsustainable. People are either too afraid to say it. People either don't have the language to express it, or they are tied to those interests and are benefiting from it.
What I mean is, if you are taking a lot from Marx, does that make you, for huge numbers of people, public enemy number one? If you think about how America responded to communism after the Second World War in this sort of almost hysterical way, but much deeper in terms of foreign policy and all the rest of it, that is still deeply ingrained in American psyche.
Yes.
And in Europe to some degree as well for different reasons, but the fall of the Berlin Wall and all of that.
But I think that speaks to the reason why Marxian analysis is so powerful, because it was so scary that it needed to be purged from academia. It was a political project. Like academics were, you can read the Powell report. It's all about a project of purging academia from critical knowledge. And this is the whole point, is that part of it is this demonization of Marx. But, the most emancipatory tradition, you see the Frankfurt School, Antonio Gramsci, Rosa Luxemburg, people who were for the liberation of humankind. So what I do is to say, let's drop old categories. Let's think about ways, reclaiming words. Like freedom is a word that should be reclaimed in the radical tradition. We're not for the state. The idea that Marx is a statist is absurd. Marx was seeing the capitalist state as a problem and as an oppressive machine. And this is the whole point. Actually, Marx was vindicating the idea of freedom and agency and subjectivity and collective welfare. And this is the problem, is that if we still are trapped in categories that made sense during the Cold War, we will never look forward. So I want to reclaim the word freedom, the word economic democracy, because these are words that I think can connect people much more.
And how do you actually think change would happen? Are you revolutionary?
We are testing alternatives on the ground. Academics love to preach about general ideas and never get involved. I think they're culprits. They're responsible. They're part of the problem. Even these supposed lefty scholars.
Absolutely. This was a huge gripe. And people say, George, aren't you also guilty of this? No. All my entire, except for one instance where I worked for a corporation doing partnerships, which was this amalgamation of sales and marketing. Except for that 7-month stint, my entire professional career, and even before that, has been in the grassroots, on the ground. But this was part of my problem, right? It's we have all these high-minded discussions and we don't fucking do anything. And all these liberals and leftists who also benefit from the system as it is, they just want to sit around and intellectually jerk each other off.
They're part of the problem if they don't engage. And academia, even on the left, is so elitist and so separate from people's problems and people's ways of thinking that, again, they are responsible. So what we're trying to do in Tulsa, again, Tulsa is, I think, one chapter of what I hope will continue building as a pilot project that can be reproduced with its own characteristic everywhere else, is the idea that knowledge is of the people, for the people, coming and stemming from people's participation. And that's why we do public education. That is really the first step. And then we organize through an assembly that is a way for people to try out something different.
But what does getting involved mean? I mean, you don't just mean protest movement, do you? I mean, should they be involved in local government, in collectives?
So
Go on.
To give you an example, we just had a big event with 400 people, which is a lot for Tulsa, with the mayor sitting there to respond to a conversation about participatory budgeting. Participatory budgeting is a reality that has been completely excluded from the way we run our economy because it's dangerous for the status quo, but it's something that was invented in Brazil, actually, and we should really look at in the 80s. It's the idea that people can take on responsibilities in ideating how their money should be spent and voting on it in a way that actually is much more inclusive. This is happening in some parts of the world, but this could be, for example, an instrument to get people to realize that they can have much more agency. That's the value workers produce. It's overly taxed because it's workers that pay taxes, not investors, okay? And that money that is being taxed, it's used not for people and their social services, but again, to foment wars in the south of the globe. So the whole system is completely irrational, that we need to completely subvert it. Marx would tell us we live in an upside-down world, and he was right. We do live in an upside-down world. So what I'm saying is that we need to propose these alternatives. Putting pressure on the local governments is one possibility. So as an institution, as the Free, we are now launching a campaign for participatory budgeting, which is all about taxing the wealth in town through actually income taxation of the very rich. And at the same time, demanding that this money is not allocated according to the priorities of the usual suspects, but according to the logic of need. And this is something that can happen. It's realistic. It fits even within the constitutional framework and the current laws. It's just about political will.
Isn't it? So at the moment, you think democracy is the vehicle to deliver change, even though you think democracy is corrupted and underpinning, economics as we know it of capitalism.
So what I would tell you is that I think we need to be more specific of what we mean by democracy. There's liberal democracy, which is, again, this oligarchic.
I think I just found the only other person in the world that I know of, I'm just learning of her, who shares my political philosophy. Holy crap, I need this book like I need air.
Farce by which very few make decisions, and then we as consumers get to come vote once in a while and we feel like we're so empowered, but actually we count nothing. And on the other hand, participatory democracy, which is based on people actually having a say on the material conditions that we are building. So what does this look like? It looks like, different ways. The time I was reading, that I studied, are the factory councils of someone like Antonio Gramsci, which is about workers actually deciding on how to produce and why. Now it's about neighborhood councils that exist in Latin America. They're very strong, for example. In Tulsa, the idea is that through this assembly, we can start breaching market dependence. For example, again, organizing groups of people that go back to the concept of food sovereignty. How do we achieve food sovereignty? In Oklahoma, 1 out of 4 children suffers hunger. And the only way to get this to stop is if we gain back access to food and we fight against food deserts. And this is one.
This is neither here nor there. And honestly, I should not stop the video for something so trite, but she has this mix of an American and Italian accent sometimes, and like they kind of blend into each other. Sorry.
One of the possible ways in which we can have participatory democracy in action.
So a political party is not necessarily the vehicle to deliver this?
I don't think you necessarily need a political party, especially what parties look like today, especially in a country like the United States.
I don't feel like cooking today, so I'm trying to.
But if you're a scholar of sort of Gramsci, I mean, how do you achieve that persuasion of enough people?
That's very important. So Gramsci has deeply influenced my ideas because Gramsci is the person who came up with the idea of hegemony, right? Is the idea that capitalism is strong because capitalism is able to rule, the capitalist elite rules not only by coercion, but also by consensus, right? And this is what hegemony is about. It's about convincing those who are suffering that actually the system is doing their interest. And this is the way you get people to comply, to like passively accept. So what we need here is
Chomsky
something that goes two ways. You need a public education that is more critical and historical, and this is kind of what I tried to do in my book to like, again, it's not just me. A lot of people are doing it, but I'm trying to make it accessible in a way that I think a lot of scholars have lacked interest in doing. At the same time, public education.
Absolutely. None of the scholarship matters if it's not accessible to the people who can benefit from it the most.
Education has to go with participation and institution building. This is what Gramsci was doing. He was saying the only knowledge that actually is interesting knowledge comes from participation and construction of counter-hegemonic spaces.
How do you get the middle class, the people with some money, to buy into this when they only stand to lose?
I think the class that defends the capitalist class the most is the working rich. So the ultra wealthy, the ones who own, be it via shares or, like a partnership in an institution, they are obviously going to protect their interests, but the class under them, right? The executive class, the ones who are still in the 1%, but their wealth are tied to their employment. They are the ones, they serve as the sort of vanguard of the capitalist class. They protect the capitalist class. And that's what that's kind of what they're paid to do. These are your executive level folks, your director level folks, the ones who disseminate the orders of the capitalist. I think, they are the biggest concern.
I don't think they stand to lose. That's the whole point, is to realize that the alliances are much broader. The middle class is really a construction that, by the way, now is completely disappearing, because that so-called middle class, what matters...
There's the struggling middle class, yeah, of course. But there is also a middle class with resources.
Absolutely. But the point is that class is not defined by your bank account. It's defined by your social positioning within the social relations of production. So the question to ask is, where does the majority of your income come from? Does it come from labor or with a paycheck, or does it come from investment and capital gains and rent?
Yeah, this person knows what she's talking about. And by that definition, then, the working rich, their class, is really another subsect of the working class, because they are indeed working. Their income, their wealth comes from their labor. Whereas the shareholder class, the capitalist class, their wealth does not come from labor. It comes from ownership. It comes from ownership, right? And truly, there's only two classes. The middle class was this sort of facade to perpetuate this idea that the system is fair and free and equal. You either work or you own. Now, you might take home a little more than that person, but you're either working or you're owning.
This is your class positioning. Then you can be a worker that is better off than other workers. But the point is that as the system stands, the system is disintegrating all those social resources that are allowing those happy workers to still maintain a better life. And these people are being tracked down. We know the middle class in the United States basically doesn't exist anymore. And it's a paradox, because the American dream was based on the idea that everyone, if they worked hard enough, they could achieve a car, a refrigerator, and television. But this is, again, reducing us to consumers. We can be much more humane if even people like me, I'm a professor of economics. I'm not starving in the street. I do pretty well. But I still will gain into humanity if I participate in a collective that is not just my family and my neighbor, but actually people at large that come together through assemblies and try to...
This is all I've been trying to say. And frankly, I have not developed the emotional maturity to communicate it as she does. Also, I will say she's not dealing with 15-year-old trolls. Maybe she would still handle that better than me. It's not a matter of competition. But I say it to say, this is all I've been trying to say. She explains it beautifully. She explains it with an intellectual and with an intellectual prowess, with a simplicity and a sort of poise that I lack. But this is all I've been trying to say, Chad.
To actually take decisions together. This is how we transform our humanity into something much more fulfilling.
What are you asking people to do about their private property? I mean, particularly, middle class in America and Britain means slightly different things, I think. But, certainly in Britain, you have a middle class that is home owning, property owning. That is their economic security.
Fortunately, these conversations have been being had for years, and we still haven't figured out exactly what the mode of change is. But I think now more than ever, we find ourselves in a position where change is simply happening. And so these are the most opportune moments to try to enact change, because the system is in flux. When the system is in flux, it's at its most vulnerable.
That's great.
Are you saying they've got to give it up?
No, but this is another myth about Marxism. Marxism never said that we should get rid of,
But that is their capital gain. That's where they make their wealth, isn't it? Land and property.
Absolutely. But the point is that the majority of their income, I assure you, comes from wages. So again, it's not a binary workers capitalist, but it is important to keep track of the most important situatedness. So the idea here is that everyone should be able to have a roof over their head and afford a roof over their head, right? And so we need to make sure that this is a reality for everybody. And we know that this economic system is actually buying out these people to make us all into renters that then again have to spend a lot of time to try to find a job to be able to make that rent. So the point is that if you're lucky enough to own a house, that is what you should imagine everyone else being able to achieve. And by the way, right now, owning a house is a real pain. If you're a property owner, you know that it's a very individualistic mindset. There's plenty of alternative ideas of collective ownership that are much more empowering because you don't need to worry about, something breaking or paying the property tax. It would be a much more emancipated space in which everyone could think about the housing as a political project.
And you clearly think this is a moment for your ideas because of the extremes that capitalism, particularly in the West, is throwing up.
Yes, and I do think that the cause of the liberation of Palestine, I talk about Palestine in the book by looking at the economic dimension of the subordination of the Palestinian territories towards Israel and the West, and showing how that is just a microcosm of the subordination of the whole global South, where the majority of the population lives of the world, right? 7 out of the 8 billion actually live in the global South. And so how these are moments in which you see that people standing up for crude injustices, people can wake up and say, we need something different. And I really do think that connecting the struggles and seeing that they're all one struggle, it's a struggle for humanity over profit, is very important.
But again, if you go to the global South, development is all based around mimicking the Western capitalism of the global North.
Completely, and that's the real problem. And that's why underdevelopment keeps growing. And this is the whole point, is that economists have this myth, and it's really interesting because it was this economist called Walter Rostow who came up with this non-communist manifesto about how to develop countries in the global South. And the myth is that we're all the same, the United States, Britain, and Africa, all countries are the same. They could potentially all be on the same development path. It's just about where you are. They're just behind us, but the path is the same. The trajectory is universal. This is a lie. If you ask critical scholars on dependency theory, it's the opposite. It's actually the trajectory of some countries going up are based on other countries going down. So there will never be a universal trajectory. And this is really important, is for these countries in the global South to realize that if they listen to the IMF of the World Bank and open up their markets and implement more austerity, privatize.
And some countries in the global South, particularly African countries, are beginning to realize this.
Deregulate labor, do the whole recipe that supposedly is going to help them be more efficient, they are losing as they're doing that. And that's why
the trouble is the elites running those countries gain.
Exactly. So the debt increases in these countries. The elites are gaining both internationally and locally, but the workers are losing.
This is the world's largest iPhone 17 case. This is the real iPhone 17. And this is why I will only use a mouse case.
Compared to most Amazon cases, Mouse has spent 10 years and millions of dollars building, refining, learning, all to develop this, Limitless 7.0, the most advanced Limitless case ever.
So I am still wondering how the workers unite, in your world without a revolution. Aren't you a revolutionary ultimately?
Well, I think revolution is, again, a word that we've associate with such negative connotation, right? Blood, disaster. Again, it shows you how indoctrinated we are, because revolution just means social transformation and change. And if there's blood, it's usually because there's a reaction to revolution, right? There's actually reaction coming to those.
All of the violence has been because the resistance of the elites. If the elite said, oh, you're right, let's make these changes, there wouldn't be blood, but rather it's because they respond with violence.
Those at the top who don't want any social transformation. So revolution is really actually a positive word, because it just means change. It means change. And as humans, we deserve change to fulfill our full human prosperity. So
if you could just change the world now with one fell swoop, what would you do?
I would prioritize the two most important issues right now that are the physical violence and the killing of people, not just in Palestine, in Sudan and many other places, and food as a primary resource. And I would try to organize these two priorities as society's priorities. And this is very important because this is potentially revolutionary and subversive. This is the thing. If you want people to get fed, you are a revolutionary because the logic of profit will never bring you there. So we need to say, as a society, we are intelligent agents. We can change things. Let's set ourselves basic priorities. Everyone will agree that people deserve to have a plate in front of them once a day at least. Everyone will agree that children should not be slaughtered by our drones. So this is the basic thing. How do we collectively operate to achieve these goals without being dependent on the logic of profit? Because currently the idea is that if we depend on profit, then as a byproduct, people will get fed. And this is completely irrational. Again, it's upside down. Let's see how collectively we can have two priorities that are very basic, and people on the right, on the left, or wherever will say it's just so basic, it has to we can't agree. And let's figure out how to do that. And what I would say is that we will need to do this by focusing on use value, on the materiality, on food itself, rather than on value as abstraction, as money. And if we can do this, things will start to change. And I think we need to start locally. I think the thing is that we can't, it's very scary to think in a global context because we feel so disempowered, because we feel so little. The idea is not we start local, but we think global, because if we have different chapters of these alternative...
You start local and think global. Oh my God, I'm gonna get this book and read the hell out of it. You start local and you think global, chat.
Institutions that are actually devoted to achieving these needs, then things can change. And I think this is why you can collaborate with local institutions and with governments, but you need to pressure them to do things differently, because on their own, they'll never do it, because they're listening to the technocrats that have these economic models that tell them that the problem are the people rather than the system.
Clara Mattei, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hope you enjoyed that. You can watch all of these interviews.
It's great. That was great. All right, I'm going to come back and watch so this is huge. Look at how they're framing this property tax hike. Fucking Forbes breaking news. Of course, Forbes is a classist institution. I mean, come on. Anyway, this is still fairly fresh. I mean, it released, 2 hours ago? But I think this is extremely relevant. Mamdani being the mayor of New York, one of the most prominent cities in the world, one of the most wealthy cities in the world. I think he's also a manifestation of the change, the groundswell and desire for change that people are feeling, and a signal that says the system is not unchangeable. It's not this fact of life. Simply need to work for it collectively. I won't react to this today. I'll save this for some other time. I'll probably react to it tomorrow because it's like an hour long, and frankly, I am exhausted, so I'm going to move to gaming. But this is a must watch for sure. Look. I'm going to end this live, and I'm going to start a new one, and we'll switch to the game and then discussion chat. See you soon.